Hey there! Welcome to another Scratch tutorial, this time focusing on the redesigned stereoscopic workflow in Scratch 8.5. So when it comes to stereo, you can have two types of workflows. The first type is where you have left and right eye in separate image streams. The other workflow is where you have both eye streams wrapped in a single clip in a certain pattern, like over-under. This is often the case for stereoscopic VR media. Now the first thing you want to do is to wrap all your shots in stereo nodes. For this to happen, you need to place each right eye shot as a version above the corresponding left eye shot, which we've done already. Then hit the stereo setup button. Now you can choose whether you want to go after the full timeline or the current slot or a number of selected slots to merge the corresponding clips into stereo nodes. Next, you can enable the timecode match option. This helps if, for instance, the right eye camera was turned on later than the left eye camera, and so the clips do not start at the very same frame. In this case, Scratch will slip the right eye accordingly to match the timecode of the left eye. Then hit execute. So you now can see all our shots are merged into stereo nodes, which is indicated by the S appendix in the clip name and also the puzzle piece icon in the thumbnail. Okay, now let's enter into the player and have a closer look at our setup. Therefore, swipe to the right and bring up the source stack. Or click the structure button in the top menu bar to bring up the structure view. Here you can see that both eyes, left and right eye, are being fed into the stereo node. New in Scratch 8.5 is the stereo menu, which first of all lets you choose whether you want to view the left or the right eye. Next you can choose whether you want to grade on the master, which would be the stereo node, or if you want to grade each eye separately, depending on what's selected here. So let's select the left eye and turn it a bit more red, and select the right eye and turn it a bit more blue. Now if I select the master and let's say want to change the gamma, make it a little bit darker, I'm changing both eyes. So no matter whether I'm on left or right eye, both eyes will get affected. Let's brighten this up a little bit again. Now if you want to watch both eyes in conjunction, you could enter dual view with hotkey D. Next, if you right click and go to Settings, Monitor menu, you can choose what the right side of your dual view should show. Right now it's set to left, but we could also set it to right to watch the right eye here and the left eye on the left. By the way, this also works in split view, which you can enter with hotkey S and wipe from left to right to compare the color balance of the two eyes. Right now they don't match too well. Back to dual view. You also can select from a number of patterns, like side by side, like line interleave, checkerboard, anaglyph, and also you can view a difference mat to get an idea about the convergence between the two eyes. Now let's set this to side by side and go back to the matrix. Now, the last thing in the stereo menu is the sync option. The sync option enables you to copy over a grade from one eye to the other. So make sure eye is selected here, and let's create a layer on the left eye, draw a shape around the face here, add some softness to it, and make it a little bit darker. Like so. Now the sync option lets me choose whether I want to copy over only the primaries, or selected layers, or all layers. Let's leave it to all layers and hit the sync button. So you can see now the shape also appeared on the right eye stream. Note that the sync will not adjust the geometry of layers once graded to not break the manual convergence you set. To explain this a little bit better, let me offset the shape a little bit. And now brighten it up on the right side. Now hit the sync button again to copy it over to the left eye And as you will see, if I switch over to the left eye view, the shape stayed where it originally was, just the grading inside the shape was updated. Talking about convergence, you can go to the config menu and enable the convergence button here. And if you now dial in an X offset, you're basically dialing in the convergence between the two eyes. Another way to deal with convergence is to grade on the master node. And let's go to this shot for example. Exit dual view and draw a shape around the moon. Add a little bit of softness. And let's say we want to brighten up the moon. Like so. So if we now watch the right eye, we can see that the footage behind the shape is obviously offsetted. To compensate for that, we can go to the camera menu and switch the camera to be stereo for this shot. Now readjust the canvas position again and dial in a different eye separation of 1.5, which matches our setup much better. Let's just align the shape on the moon again, and if we now swap between left and right eye, we can see that the convergence of our stereo setup plays along quite nicely. So this way we only need to create one shape on our master node instead of creating two shapes on the separate eyes. Note that the camera setup is for the whole scene, or all layers so to speak. So if you have multiple layers with different convergence, you cannot do that with the camera menu workflow, but need to grade the separate eyes. Now let's have a look at our single stream workflow. Now here we have a stereoscopic VR clip. Unfortunately, this clip doesn't ship the metadata to tell Scratch that it actually is a stereoscopic VR clip. So we need to do that manually by swiping to the right to bring up the metadata stack and set the projection to equirectangular and the stereo mode to over-under. Now you do not necessarily need to wrap this clip into a stereo node. If we enter into the player, we can see that we now see both eyes, and we could potentially grade both eyes by creating layers for each stream separately. Also, we can set the viewport to 360 mode and pan through the scene without any problems. If I bring up the pan zoom tool, you can see that the dragging area only affects the upper stream. However, if you have an Oculus or HTC Vive attached to your Scratch workstation, both eyes, left and right eye, will be sent to the device. Still, working without a stereo setup has its limitations and can be quite cumbersome. So let's go back to the construct and wrap our clip into a stereo node. Now, looking at our setup here using the structure view, you can see that it's a little bit different from what we had before. In this case, both eyes are combined in one stream. So what Scratch does is duplicate that stream and pipe both of those streams into nest nodes, and on one nest node shift the content to only show the upper half of the source clip, which is the left eye, and on the other nest node shift the clip so it shows only the lower half of the source clip, which is the right eye. And then both of those nest nodes, showing each individual eye, are being wrapped in the stereo node. There is just one thing to consider. By now wrapping our source clip into a stereo node, the resolution of the clip gets cut into half, so we need to adjust our output resolution to the new resolution of our stereo setup. From here on out, it's the same way all over again. We can bring up the stereo menu and change between left and right eye. We can grade on the master or per eye, and we can also set our viewport into 360 mode and take a look around. Now let's have a look at how to output our stereo project out of Scratch. Therefore, let's go to the Outputs menu and select the main output node. New in Scratch 8.5 is the stereo generator. If if we add this one to our main output node, we can tell the stereo generator whether we want to output left eye or right eye or any of the patterns. So let's leave this stereo generator on left, add a second one, and set it to right. So now we can output both eyes in their full resolution. We can of course add, let's say, up the ProRes encoders after the stereo generators, but also let me add a third stereo generator and set it to a certain pattern, like, let's say, over-under. Now if we look at this output node, we will see that both eyes are squeezed and basically now half their resolution. If we want to output both eyes in a single stream but full resolution, we obviously need to double the height of the clip. So let's take our HD timeline times 2. And if we now look at the output node, we have both of our eyes in their full resolution. Lastly, let's wrap this tutorial by adding subtitles to our combined stereo generator. Therefore, I'm adding an image node and enter into the player with it, go to the matrix, create a layer and add the burn-in plugin on that layer. Now if we go to the shot menu, we will find the controls for the burn-in plugin. Let me first go to the global tab and load a subtitle file. Now that we have the subtitle file loaded, we can go back to the text module, center it, and fill in #subtitle. Now we have the subtitle file loaded in our text box, we just need to position it. Let's maybe put it somewhere here on 835 on the y-axis, like so. Now to duplicate it to the other eye, we will just create a new text box, also fill in #subtitle, and now put in our 835 plus 1080 pixels to offset it to the other eye, like so. Now we could even dial in a convergence by setting the X value to, let's say, 8 for the right eye, go back to text box number 1 and offset it to -8 on the other eye, like so. So now we've added subtitles to our combined stereo output, after which we can obviously add any of the other exporters like our MP4 H.264 encoder. Okay, this concludes the tutorial about the new redesigned stereo workflow in Scratch 8.5. Hope this was useful to you and see you next time. Bye!